Using Brazil to illustrate a stark contrast, comedian and political commentator Bill Maher made a blistering critique of the current state of American democracy and the depravity of the Republican Party. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert buttons before you go. I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, friends, we have several clips to look at in this video, and all of them are from the most recent episode of Real Time with Bill Maher, a show that, quite frankly, I hardly watch these days because Bill Maher himself is a bit too enlightened centrist and preoccupied with culture war nonsense. But every now and then, he knocks it out of the park. As a matter of fact, he has in the past 2 episodes of Real Time with Bill Maher. And in this segment of New Rule, he makes a very incisive critique of American democracy and compares and contrasts the United States with Brazil.
So here's what happened. In 2020, American incumbent President Donald Trump, a thrice married far-right populist, lost his re-election bid and then embarked on a campaign of outright lies to convince his supporters the election had been rigged, which resulted in the siege of the American Capitol on January 6th. Fast forward almost 2 years to the day, January 8th, 2023, and Jair Bolsonaro, Brazil's thrice married far-right populist incumbent president, known as the Trump of the tropics, repeats the Trump playbook exactly after he loses his re-election bid and thousands of his supporters storm the Brazilian capital. Both insurrections failed, but here's where we see the difference between a healthy democracy and one that's hanging by a thread.
So real quick, I thought that was a great contrast. And on January 8th, or in the aftermath of January 8th, 2023, when this channel was in its infancy, I made several videos about that because immediately, the immediate actions that Brazil took, as well as the predicate itself, I mean, it made for a nice compare and contrast. So just as a reminder, this is from Reuters. The assault on Brazilia, that's the capital of Brazil's, main government buildings was the Brazilian equivalent of the January 6th insurrection. About 2,000 people were arrested over the Brazilia attack, though most were later released. Others have been convicted by the Supreme Court on charges of an attempted coup, among other crimes, following outgoing police investigations into those who took part in the riots and who fostered or funded the attack. Jair Bolsonaro is under investigation by the Supreme Court for allegedly masterminding the riots, something he denies. Brazil's electoral authority has also banned Bolsonaro from running for elected office for 8 years over his abuse of power and misuse of the media ahead of the 2022 election, when he summoned ambassadors to vent unfounded claims about Brazil's electronic voting system. Okay, so again, very similar to Trump in terms of what he did and attempted to do and wanted to do, but a very different set of outcomes in the immediate aftermath. And we'll get into why in just a minute, but let's play the next clip from Bill Maher.
Today, only 6% of Brazilians say they support the mob that sacked their capital. But in America, Trump's more popular than ever and on track to regain power. In Brazil, not only has Bolsonaro been banned from running again anytime soon, but the country united around their new leader, who walked arm in arm with congressional leaders from the left and right in solidarity against the uprising, arm in arm. In America, no arm in arm. Arms, yes. Plenty of that. And threats. Most Republicans were literally scared to death to do the right thing. They didn't want to be hung like Mike Pence or castrated like Lindsey Graham. Because the thing is, in Brazil, their conservative party is where ours was during Watergate, when Republicans were willing to throw Nixon under the bus because they still had ideals higher than owning the libs.
Absolutely correct, right? Listen, the Republican Party has always had its issues, and it had its issues during the Nixon era. But Bill Maher is correct. When President Nixon engaged in the Watergate shenanigans, he was told by Republicans in private that he must resign, because if he did not resign, not only would he be impeached, he would be convicted in the Senate, which requires a supermajority, which would have required Republican votes, right? Republicans at the time, for all their faults, were willing to put the country and statesmanship over partisanship. That is completely flipped today. And that is a unique problem for the Republican Party. Democrats don't have that problem. But as Bill Maher says, and he correctly diagnosed, the entire platform of the Republican Party right now, even among its elected officials, is just own the libs. And we can't pretend otherwise.
Changed? Well, part of it is structural. Their Constitution is only 35 years old. Ours is 235, and it looks it. We not only still use old-timey words like gerrymandering, we still practice it. The average Republican congressman is in a safe seat with an electorate he chose himself, and he's only scared of two things: a primary opponent with more guns on his Christmas card, and getting a nickname from Trump. Trump has proven that in America you can absolutely attempt a coup, and at the very least there's no immediate repercussions. The only way we are allowed to punish a president is through impeachment, where the jury is the Senate. Except California has 68 times the population of Wyoming, and yet we both get 2 senators. We both get 2 jurors. In Brazil, elections are overseen by a special electoral court with judges who serve 2 terms. We don't have that. We have a partisan Supreme Court whose terms expire when they do. And who are mostly picked by presidents who lost the popular vote. And our elections are run by the states, so you got a hodgepodge of 50 different election systems with 50 different rule books. And we're the only nation on earth that chooses their election by way of an electoral college, which is somehow even worse than regular college.
Again, all these criticisms perfectly fair and incisively said, and we've complained about most of them on this channel in previous videos, but he's right. The United States is the oldest continuous republic in the world, right? So we have something to pat ourselves on the back for, right? We have the world's oldest constitution, and many other democratic republics on earth that have come since then have taken direct inspiration from our constitution. So I'm not saying that we got everything wrong, but they improved on our process. They didn't adopt things like the Electoral College because they realized, wow, indirect elections for the nation's highest office, that's really stupid. And those who did adopt the Electoral College just got rid of them after a certain amount of time, right? So we're the last nation on earth that uses an Electoral College to elect our head of state. To say nothing of the other counter-majoritarian, anti-majoritarian relics that litter our system. Again, you know, having a Supreme Court with lifetime appointments, the fact that most of the Supreme Court justices in the current iteration of the Supreme Court were appointed by presidents who didn't have a popular mandate, who became president because of the Electoral College, not because of the popular vote, as well as the fixed proportionality of the Senate, right? Again, where red rural states have enormously more power, pound for pound, than blue states. And even the House of Representatives, which is supposed to skew more towards more populated states, right? That was supposed to be the compromise. Because of Republican gerrymandering in places like Wisconsin and North Carolina, Republicans are able to compete pretty well even there, even though they are generally outnumbered. Right now, the House of Representatives is under the control of the Republican Party. So it's funny how the Republican Party complains about affirmative action, given that their politics is affirmative action. They benefit from electoral affirmative action and political affirmative action in our system. They are given cheat codes. They are given a leg up because they can't compete otherwise. And we have to change things about the American system. We have moved beyond these relics if they were ever relevant in the first place. But the problem is we have the world's oldest constitution, but we also have the world's most difficult constitution to amend. There have been like 12,000, literally, like 11,800 some attempts to amend the Constitution, but we have only had 27 amendments. A fraction of a fraction of a fraction of those attempts have been successful because you need 2/3 of both chambers of Congress, and then you need 3/4 of the states to ratify amendments. That's how damn difficult this is to change. American politics is affirmative action for the Republican Party. One more clip from Bill Maher. It's a really incisive conclusion that I really like.
Sorry, but we ran the experiment and we lost. In Brazil, the politics of grievance has its limits. Here it doesn't. There are 172 election deniers currently sitting in Congress, but Republicans only threw out one guy, and ironically, he was from Brazil.
Reference to George Santos there. So listen, again, I think that new rule monologue was great. I think Bill Maher made some incisive critiques of the American political system. I like the fact that he didn't indulge in any like both sidesism or false equivalences. The fact of the matter is that the problem in politics today on a macro level is unique to the Republican Party. Not that the Democratic Party is perfect. Bill Maher will always go out of his way to complain about the culture war aspects of the Democratic Party, and I know a lot of others do as well. But when it comes to subverting American democracy and the authoritarianism and the anti-majoritarianism and the tyranny of the minority, that's unique to the Republican Party. And that's part of the reason why Brazil, when they encountered something very similar to what we encountered with Donald Trump, they were able to take very different decisive decisions to punish and deter attempts to steal elections and to overthrow democracies. And that's another reason why we have to change the system to be able to do the same thing, to immunize ourselves, to defend ourselves from subversive authoritarian elements. And the first step into doing that is to voting in bold, progressive, pro-democratic candidates in every damn election we can. There is no room in American elected office, in my opinion, these days, for the Republican Party. Let me know what you think in the comments.